Montana Territory, August 1883, the day Felicity Fremont stepped off the stagecoach in Dawson's Hollow. The sky was the color of an old bruise, and the air smelled of dust and rain. She had one worn carpetbag, a torn letter, and two children clutching her skirts with wide, uncertain eyes. She was 23, widowed twice, and tired so deep in the bones she swore it echoed when she walked. The townsfolk stared like they always did in places like this, small towns with long memories and short patience. But Felicity was not here for their kindness. She was here for Isaac Jennings. He stood across the street, tall and still beside the livery barn, arms folded, hat low over his dark eyes. His coat was clean, boots polished, and his silence louder than the clatter of the horses behind her. Everyone in Dawson's Hollow knew who he was, the Jennings boy who struck gold before he turned 25, who turned cattle into coin, and refused every woman who tried to tame him. He had money, land, and a voice like a drawl dragged through gravel. But he had no wife, no heirs, and no interest in either. Until now. Felicity squared her shoulders, looked him dead in the eye, and walked straight across the muddy road. "Mr. Jennings," she said, her voice steady though her knees trembled. "You need a wife or a witness." The silence that followed stretched longer than it should have. The storm cracked somewhere eastward, but Isaac did not flinch. He looked down at the two children beside her, Vera, age 6, with her mother's sharp jaw and a streak of dust across her nose, and Virgil, 4, his small hand gripping his sister's tightly. Isaac's eyes came back to Felicity. "That depends," he said slowly. "What exactly do you mean by that?" She lifted the folded paper from her bag, a deed to land her late husband had bought, then died trying to defend. Problem was, the ranch next door claimed it was theirs, the same ranch whose owner held sway with the county judge. The same ranch that had burned her barn and threatened to come back if she did not leave. "I need someone who can stand beside me in court," she said. "They will not listen to a woman. They will not listen to a poor widow. But they will listen if I am a Jennings. You think marrying me will fix that? I think marrying you is the only way they will not steal what little I have left." Isaac looked at her for a long time. "You are not from here. No, you have nothing. Just these two and a name I am trying to keep clean. I do not want a wife. I do not want a husband," she said, her voice rising now, heat blooming in her cheeks. "But I will not run again. I am done running." A gust of wind tossed her hair into her face. Vera clung tighter to her skirt. Virgil blinked up at Isaac like he was a statue come to life. Then Isaac said, "Come with me." He turned and walked toward the church at the end of the street. She hesitated only a moment before following, her children silent beside her. Inside, the preacher was sweeping the front pews. Isaac spoke just 3 words, "We need vows," and the old man blinked, dropped his broom, and reached for his Bible. There was no kiss, no ring. Just words and silence and the sound of Vera sniffling quietly from the front pew while Virgil gnawed on the corner of a hymn book. But when it was done, Isaac turned to her and said, "You are a Jennings now." And that was how it began. He gave them 2 rooms in his house, one for her, one for the children. He did not touch her, did not ask questions. He rode out every morning before dawn, came back smelling of leather and pine, and sat quiet at supper while the children chattered and Felicity served beans and cornbread. At night, she lay awake listening to the wind rattle the shutters. The house was too big, too quiet, but it was safe. A week passed. Then 2. And then one night, as she folded laundry by the hearth, he came in, his shirt torn, blood on his sleeve. She dropped the cloth. "What happened?" "Fence dispute," he said simply, wincing as he pulled the shirt over his head. "Someone thinks I am getting too close to the East Ridge. She moved without thinking, grabbing a basin and cloth, kneeling beside him. "Sit," she said. He did. She cleaned the wound, her fingers brushing the thick muscle of his arm. He watched her, eyes dark under the brim of his hat. "You should not get involved in my troubles," he said quietly. "You married me." "I did not marry you for this." She looked up at him. "Then why did you?" He did not answer. Later that night, after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch, staring at the stars. She stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of him through her nightdress. "You ever been in love, Mr. Jennings?" "No," he said. She smiled faintly. "Me neither." He looked at her then, really looked, and something shifted. The next day he took her to the courthouse, sat beside her while the judge read the deed, then the forged one the neighbors had brought. When the judge ruled in her favor, the room erupted in whispers. Outside, Isaac turned to her. "That land is yours now," she nodded. "We both know they will not stop." "No," he said, "they will not." That night she found him again on the porch. This time she brought a blanket and sat right beside him. "You could have turned me away," she said. "I thought about it. And I saw those kids, saw you." He did not say more. He did not have to. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He did not move away. And for the first time in a long while, Felicity let herself breathe. It was not love, not yet, but it was something. Something steady. Something warm. And it was theirs. By early September, the cottonwoods along the creek behind the Jennings ranch had begun to yellow at the edges, and the mornings carried a bite that warned of snow waiting somewhere beyond the ridgeline. Felicity rose before the sun most days, not out of duty, but because quiet hours with her hands in hot water gave her space to think. Vera helped gather kindling without being asked, and Virgil clung to his wooden horse as though it could carry the weight of the world. Isaac left most mornings without a word, but he returned before dusk every time. That in itself was a kind of promise. One evening, while the children lay asleep in their narrow beds and the coals in the hearth glowed low, Isaac knocked once on her bedroom doorframe. He didn't enter. "I'm riding to Anaconda tomorrow," he said. "Won't be back till after sundown." She folded her hands in her lap. "Business. Bank's transferring ownership papers on a herd I bought up north. Need my name on the line." She nodded. "Do you want me to pack food?" He hesitated. "I want you to come." Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the suddenness of it. "Why?" "Figure it's time you saw what's yours, too." They didn't speak again that night, but before dawn, Vera helped her braid her hair, and Virgil insisted on carrying the small satchel Isaac had left for them by the door. The buckboard was hitched and ready, and Isaac stood beside it, coat buttoned to the neck, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his eyes. The ride to Anaconda took most of the day. The land unspooled around them, rolling hills that turned to pine-thick foothills, then opened into a patchwork of gold and rust where the mining town rose out of the earth like a scar stitched over with ambition. Smoke curled from chimneys, and men moved like ants along scaffolds and rail lines. Felicity kept her eyes on the road ahead. "I've never been in a place so loud with so little said." Isaac gave a quiet grunt. "Most men here came to get rich or get buried. Both if they stick around long enough." The bank sat on the corner of Main, a two-story brick building with iron bars over the windows and a polished door that looked too fine for the dust it faced. Inside, the clerk greeted Isaac like someone used to being nervous around him. While they waited, Felicity wandered to the window. Across the street, a woman with a fine parasol and an even finer expression whispered something to her companion and looked straight at her. Felicity held her gaze, then turned away. Minutes later, Isaac set a hand low on her back. "It's done." "Outside?" she asked. "What do you mean to do with the cattle? Split the herd? Bring half down to the lower pasture near your land? Let them graze through winter if the snow holds off. She looked up at him. You say your land like it's not yours, too. It's in your name. That's not the same. He didn't answer. Instead, he helped her into the wagon, his hands steady at her waist, lingering just a second longer than they needed to. Her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with the ride home. They stopped once on the way back, near a patch of aspens where the leaves shivered like coins. She laid out bread and cold ham, and the children chased each other in wide, clumsy circles. Isaac leaned against a tree and watched them. Vera's sharper than most grown men I know, he said. She's had to be. He looked at her then, not like he had before, not with that guarded sort of distance, but with something quieter, more knowing. You kept them fed, safe. Somehow, I didn't see another choice. You think anyone who's survived had more than that? She didn't answer. The wind stirred her skirt and the sun slipped behind a cloud, briefly dimming the world. That night, as they returned to the ranch, Virgil long since asleep on the seat between them, Isaac spoke without turning his head. I didn't marry you for your trouble, he said, but I'm not walking away from it either. She looked at him, throat tight. And what about the rest of it? He paused. You talking about the part where we share a name but not a life. I'm talking about the part where maybe I want more than silence and separate rooms. He didn't speak right away. Then he said, I never figured myself for someone who deserved more than silence. The wagon rolled on, wheels crunching over the gravel path. She didn't push. He'd said what he could. But later, as she tucked Vera in beneath the quilt she'd sewn from scraps back in Colorado, Isaac appeared in the doorway, holding a carved wooden box. He placed it on the small table beside the hearth. What is it? She asked. Belonged to my mother. She kept keepsakes in it, ribbons, letters, bits of lace. I thought maybe you'd want it, for things that matter. Felicity opened the lid. It smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. She looked up, and for the first time, Isaac didn't look away. Thank you, she said. He nodded. I'll see you in the morning. And just before he turned, his fingers brushed hers, a touch. Nothing more, but the quiet between them had changed. It held more than distance now. It held possibility. The first frost came overnight, unannounced, lacing the water pails with thin glass and turning the breath of cattle into slow clouds. Felicity woke to the sound of boots on the porch and found a bucket of split wood stacked neatly beside the door. Not a word left with it. Just care, quiet and practical. She lit the stove and stirred cornmeal into a pot while Vera sat stitching a hem by the window. Virgil lay on his stomach in front of the hearth, drawing patterns in the ash with a stick. They were settled, not yet rooted, but something close. The knock came mid-morning, not Isaac's. Louder, sharper, Felicity cracked the door. A man stood on the step, long coat streaked with trail dust, a pistol holstered at his hip. His face looked like it had been carved by wind and tempered by whiskey. Behind him, 2 horses pawed the hard ground. You Mrs. Jennings? He asked. She didn't answer right away. I'm not here for trouble, he added, eyeing the children through the gap in the door. Name's Wren. I rode with Isaac back when the Bitterroot herd got taken by those Pike boys. He around. He's out checking the north fence. I'll wait. She stepped aside. He didn't come in, just leaned against the porch post and pulled an apple from his coat pocket, biting into it like he had all the time in the world. You kin? She asked. No. But I owed him and I pay my debts. He tossed the core into the dirt. He sent word about that boundary survey. There was a letter from Helena. Said the new lines being drawn before first snow. Illy gave a single nod. That'll stir the hornets. Felicity crossed her arms. They've been stirred. He tilted his head. You always this calm or just when cornered? I don't rattle easy. He studied her a moment longer. He told me he married, didn't say she had iron under her skin. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. When Isaac returned, he didn't show surprise at the sight of Illy on his porch, only handed off his gloves and told him supper would be ready when it was ready. That night, the three of them sat around the table while Vera read aloud from a tattered almanac and Virgil dozed against Isaac's side. After the children had been carried to bed, Felicity lingered by the sink, drying her hands slow. Isaac leaned against the doorframe. "You trust him?" she asked quietly. "About as far as you can trust a man who's been shot twice and lived both times. That's not an answer." Isaac's gaze met hers. "He saved my life once. That's enough." She nodded, drying the same plate twice. "He said something about a survey. I was waiting to tell you. If the new line holds, your property's going to run clear to the ridge. That gives you water access, grazing rights, and more to defend." He stepped into the room, took the plate from her hands and set it down. "You're not defending it alone." She looked up at him. "I don't know what this is between us, Isaac, but I'm not looking for a shadow to stand behind." "You're not behind me." "Then where am I?" He didn't answer right off. Instead, he reached out slow and touched her wrist, fingers warm and solid. "You're beside me," he said. "And I've never let anyone stand there before." Felicity's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not good at leaning on people." "You don't have to lean. Just don't walk off." Outside, Illy's voice rose in song, tuneless and low. Somewhere in the fields, a coyote yipped once, then fell silent. Isaac's hand slid from her wrist to her palm. "I married you for a reason. You asked if I needed a wife or a witness. Truth is, I needed both. Still do." She turned her hand, laced her fingers with his. "I didn't come here looking for a man. I came looking for a way to stop running." He stepped closer, the air between them warm despite the chills seeping through the window panes. "You found one." That night, for the first time, she didn't close her door behind her. When he passed the children's room, he paused to tuck the quilt tighter around Virgil, then turned and followed her upstairs. No words, just the sound of stairs creaking under shared weight, and the long exhale of two people who had stopped pretending they weren't hoping for more. The ice on the pails would melt by noon. The wind would rise again. But in that room, with the door open and the fire banked low, something steady took root. Not rushed, not declared, simply there, and it would hold. By mid-October, the wind had grown restless, peeling leaves from the cottonwoods and driving the horses into the lower pasture before dusk. The days shortened with a kind of urgency, and the evenings arrived with long shadows and the smell of chimney smoke. Felicity had taken to mending by lamplight while Vera recited her letters aloud, and Virgil fell asleep with his face pressed into her side. Isaac had started keeping a ledger open on the table after supper, scratching figures by firelight. He wrote with his left hand, the knuckles scarred and precise. Felicity didn't ask about the ink-stained pages, but she watched how his brow creased when the numbers didn't balance. One night, without looking up, he asked, "You ever worked a branding iron?" She looked up from the stitching in her lap. "I've mended wounds caused by one. That count?" He gave a quiet sound, neither laughter nor agreement. "The North herd's ready to mark. Could use someone who doesn't flinch. I'll come." They left before the frost had lifted, Isaac on horseback, Felicity seated behind him with her skirt bundled high enough for the stirrups. The children stayed with the preacher's wife, who didn't ask questions once Isaac handed her a sack of flour and a jar of molasses. The branding pen sat in a hollow past the high ridge, where the wind cut sharp and the cattle milled like a slow river. Two hired men waited with iron and rope, their jackets patched and their expressions flat. Felicity nodded once at them and said nothing more. When Isaac handed her the iron, she didn't grip it like something foreign. She turned it in her hand until the weight fit. The calves bawled and kicked, and the smoke rose clean into the sky. She didn't waver. Later, when the sun hung low and the last calf limped back into the herd, Isaac handed her a canteen. His gloves were blackened, his jaw marked by dust and ash. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "I've done harder things for less reason." He studied her, then pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. "I put your name on the cattle record. I thought they'd run under Jennings. They do, but I wrote it out Felicity Fremont Jennings, in full." She stared at the paper, then at him. "Why?" "Because a witness signs once. A wife signs again and again every time something's built." She lowered her eyes to the paper. "That's not something most men would think to say." "I'm not most men." "No," she said. "You're not." They rode back in silence. At the house, Vera rushed into her arms, cheeks cold and bright. Virgil tugged at Isaac's coat until he was lifted high, boots swinging above the floorboards. That night, as Felicity combed Vera's hair, the girl asked, "Did you ride far today?" "Far enough," Felicity said. "But not so far I couldn't find my way back." Downstairs, Isaac stood at the window watching the wind push across the fields. When she joined him, he didn't turn. "Ellie left this morning," he said. "Didn't say where. Just left a coin on the porch rail." Felicity folded her arms. "He strike you as the kind who leaves for good?" "No, but he won't come back unless there's cause." She watched the dark stretch between the barn and the fence line. "Then let's make sure there's no reason for him to." Isaac looked at her then, eyes steady. "I've been thinking about the back room. Could knock out the wall, make space for a loom or whatever you need." "I don't need a loom." "You might want one." She turned toward him, fingers brushing the edge of his sleeve. "What I want is to wake up beside someone who doesn't disappear when the sun rises." He stepped closer, the space between them smaller than it had ever been, without a word to bridge it. "I'm not going anywhere, Felicity." She didn't answer, only reached up, touched his jaw with the back of her hand. He closed his eyes just once. When she kissed him, it wasn't sudden. It was slow, rooted, the kind of kiss that came from long silences and shared burdens. He didn't rush it. He simply held her, one hand on her waist, the other at the small of her back, like he'd always known where it should go. And when they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the rhythm there. Outside, the wind picked up, shaking loose the last of the leaves. But inside, it was warm. Inside, it was home. A hard snow came early that November, thick and wet, weighing down the roof of the smokehouse and icing over the pump handle. Isaac spent the better part of 2 days rigging a second lean-to for the cattle, and laying straw in the barn loft, where the cold crept in no matter how tight the boards were nailed. Felicity kept the kitchen warm with stew and biscuits, the smell of bay leaf and browned flour clinging to the walls like comfort. The rhythm of the house had changed. There were no doors left closed between them. When Isaac stepped inside at evening, he brought the cold with him, but it never stayed long. He carved blocks of wood by the fire while Vera read aloud from a book. The preacher's wife had lent her an old tale of kings and forests, and Virgil drifted to sleep curled beneath a quilt Felicity had finished just the week before. One morning, Isaac brought back a letter from the post office in Deer Hollow. He handed it to Felicity without a word. The seal was cracked and the paper soft at the edges, but the handwriting was her uncle's, the only blood she had left in Kentucky. She read it at the table, lips pressed tight. "They want Vera and Virgil," she said finally. "Says they've got kin willing to take them in. Says it'd be better for them to grow up among proper folk." Isaac didn't speak. "I won't send them," she added, folding the letter slow. "Even if the name on that paper carries more weight than mine ever did back east." He looked at her hands, at the way she kept them still, though her jaw worked like she was biting something bitter. "I know what it means to be unwanted," she said. I won't let them feel that. Not ever. Isaac nodded once. Then they stay, she looked up then. You sure? They're mine now too. She didn't cry. She just reached over, laid her hand on top of his and left it there. That winter settled hard. The sky stayed gray for weeks and the creek froze shallow. There were days the wind howled so loud it felt like the house itself braced against it. But inside, it was steady. Felicity taught Vera to knit, and Isaac showed Virgil how to oil the saddle straps. They made a life from the quiet things. Shared chores, long evenings, and hands brushed together over the bread bowl. One afternoon, Isaac returned from the South Ridge with a limp in his step and blood darkening his trouser leg. She met him halfway across the yard, steadying him with one hand while he waved off concern. Snagged it on barbed wire, he muttered. Fool thing. Sit down before you fall down, she said, guiding him toward the bench by the pump. She cut the fabric, cleaned the gash, wrapped it tight. He winced once, then went still. You don't have to do this, he said. You're my husband. I mean all of it, the land, the cold, me. She looked up, wiping her hands on her apron. I want to. He studied her, and something in his face softened. I don't know what I did to deserve that. You stayed. He reached up, touched her cheek with his calloused fingers. You made this place feel like more than dirt and fence posts. You made it feel like home. That night, she crawled into bed beside him without hesitation. The wind rattled outside, but inside it was warm. He tucked her against him, arm around her waist, breath slow against her neck. Spring came late. The thaw was slow, and the fields stayed slick with mud until April. But when the first crocus pushed through the soil behind the barn, Felicity knelt to touch it like something holy. Vera planted peas in neat rows, careful with the seeds. Virgil chased the chickens with a stick until Isaac taught him how to scatter feed instead. On the morning of their first anniversary, Isaac saddled 2 horses and left a note on the table. Back by dusk. Feed the hens. Felicity found him by the ridge where the boundary line met the edge of the pine stand. He'd built a bench there plain but sturdy. From the seat, you could see the whole stretch of their land. Fields greening, fences mended, the roof of the house catching sunlight between the hills. I wanted you to see it from here, he said, offering her his hand. She sat beside him, letting the silence settle the way it always did between them, peaceful, earned. This was never the life I pictured, she said, watching the wind bend the tall grass. Me either. But I'd choose it. Every time. He turned toward her. I love you, Felicity. She smiled. I know. He kissed her slow, one hand on her cheek, the other at her back, anchoring them both. They stayed until the sun dipped low, then rode home together, the horses moving easy beneath them. Years passed. The children grew tall and sure-footed. Vera took to reading law books she borrowed from the circuit judge's daughter, and Virgil could rope a calf before he turned 12. Felicity planted herbs behind the house, and Isaac built her a second stove for soap making. They never spoke of the years before, not out of shame, but because they didn't need to. What they had now was enough. One morning, long after the warblers returned and the creek ran full again, Felicity stood on the porch with her hands cradling her belly. Isaac came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. Boy or girl, he asked. She leaned back into him. Doesn't matter, he kissed her temple. We'll love him just the same, and they would. Because some lives weren't built in grand moments, but in the quiet choosing of each other, over and over, day by day. And that's what they did. Always.